Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to this channel. Sorry about not posting for a long time again. I generally procrastinate with these things. So I thought I would comment on, there's kind of a debate in language learning about when you should talk, when you should start talking. I'll give my opinion about this. So a lot of things I actually hear, I hear from some people say stuff like, oh, if you want to learn a language, you have to start speaking straight away. Generally, you don't have to do anything when you're learning a language, really. I mean, it depends what you want. I mean, if you want to speak, at some point you need to speak. Because you can look at, for example, let's say, for example, a family moved to another country. Let's say, for example, say a Chinese family moved to England, have a child in England, and then the family speak Chinese, and then the kid grows up in England. Most of the time, the kid will understand Chinese, but not speak it. They'll basically just understand what their parents are speaking, but they don't actually speak it because they don't actually, the only people they're going to talk to are their parents. Unless their parents, force them to speak, they're not going to speak. So speaking is like a muscle. It's like a different part of the brain. It's like you have to basically create... So you have to create the passive knowledge of understanding, and you have to link that to the speaking. And the only way to do that is by speaking. That's kind of it. So if you want to speak in a language, eventually you need to speak. But that doesn't mean you need to speak at the start. There's no requirement. For example, I don't like to speak at the start. I don't like to start... I'm a nervous person, I'm a shy person, even though I have YouTube channels, because I'm weird, but speaking to a camera is very different to speaking to people in real life, and when you're not very confident in a language, you forget things, you're very nervous. It's not fun. It's just not fun. It's not really my kind of thing. Plus, I would argue that if you don't really know and understand the language, why are you trying to talk? It's like someone says something, you don't understand it, okay, and then you don't know what to say because you don't understand it and you don't know how to say. How do you even have a conversation? It's like impossible. And so at some point, at the start, you basically have to not have a conversation of some kind. Imagine you start learning to swim and you just jump into the deep end. It's like, but you don't know how to swim. So shouldn't you start the shallow end? Start at the shallow end is basically reading, listening, making sure you understand the language, learn the words yourself. Then when you feel ready, start speaking. That's what I do. And what does that mean when you feel like you want to start speaking? You feel ready. Well, can you understand people? So if you listen to some audio, do you understand people? Depends on the topic, obviously. But if you can't understand people at all, you can't really have a conversation. I generally recommend start speaking when you feel ready. That's pretty much it. You can start speaking straight away. There are people like YouTubers who basically learn a little bit of a language, like, hi, how are you? Why are you learning this language? How long have you been learning it? Where are you from? Like stuff like this. You can kind of memorize that and start speaking to people straight away. But it's not really a meaningful conversation, and it's mostly just for YouTube. If someone actually asks you a difficult question, like, for example, what are your political views, or stuff like that, you'd never be able to actually answer it. Because you're just memorizing a script, basically what you're doing. I don't like to do this. I prefer to have real conversations instead of just, hi, how are you, where are you from? It's kind of boring for me. So I prefer to actually properly learn stuff, don't just memorize phrases. I never memorize phrases. This is very boring for me. I mean, sometimes I can know really advanced stuff and then not actually know how to say please and thank you, which is kind of weird. Well, you get that, from like films and stuff. But say, for example, when I was learning Russian, I basically was listening to political podcasts and then reading transcripts of those, which was kind of hard to understand because I didn't really understand Russian politics at all. But maybe my technique is different to some people. Some people would prefer to speak. Some people prefer to listen. I prefer to just read a lot of stuff, listen to a lot of stuff, and then speak when I feel ready, which is normally after like 6, 7, 8 months, something like this, no idea. And with Spanish it was like 4 or 5 months, but that's because I already know Italian, but I still wouldn't start speaking straight away because I don't know the language. How do I... So generally it's about preference. You don't have to do anything really. For example, I don't like to do exercises. I find them extremely boring and frustrating, and that's why I hate Duolingo. I mean, I made videos me doing the tests on Duolingo, but I absolutely hate the website and would never learn a language like that. I almost quit Russian because of it. It's terrible. Why? Because it's like you spend time writing a whole sentence and you're, oh, wrong. Write it again. Oh, you're wrong. Write it again. Like, no, I hate this. When you read, all it is basically just like, do you understand it? Yes, keep reading. That's it. Like, there's no test and you're wrong, write it again. This is frustrating as hell. I just want, when I'm reading, it's like simple. But of course, it's difficult at first. Like, for example, I would watch TV series in Spanish, and Spanish is easily, like, it's not even a competition, the hardest language I've tried to learn for understanding. There are so many accents, people speak ridiculously fast. So when I was first watching TV series in Spanish, it's like, what? I couldn't even understand a word they said. So I'd have to read everything, and it would take me literally 3 or 4 hours to watch an hour-long episode. Eventually, it gets lower, so 2 hours and 1 hour, then it's real time. But at first, it's like you don't understand. Depends on the language. For example, I listened to a Russian podcast recently. I understood everything without any subtitles. Like, it depends on the language. Some languages are just easier to understand than others, and you're more experienced in them. So it depends. But generally, if you like doing exercises, do exercises. If you like listening to music in that language, listen to music in that. I don't ever do this. I don't like listening to music in other languages, so it's not my thing. Plus, people don't speak that way. They don't sing when you talk to them, so I want to understand people when they talk, so I don't listen to music, because people don't speak this way. I want to understand people when they speak. It just depends what your goals are, depends what you like, depends why you're doing this. And generally I recommend do what you're interested in. So if you're interested in reading books, read books in the language. If you're interested in, I don't know, reading articles, read articles in the language. If you're interested in music videos, listen to music, listen to music in that. Like, do what you like. And there's no requirement to speak straight away. Speak straight away if you want. It's very difficult. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do what you want. There are not really any good and bad things to do, unless, for example, I don't know, just reading textbooks I probably wouldn't recommend. You want to try and mix what you're doing, but there's no like right or wrong answer. A lot of the time it depends on preference. I prefer to read a lot, listen a lot, like 6 or 7 months, barely look at grammar, almost like I basically look at grammar just to understand the sentence, otherwise I just ignore it. Never do exercises. And then speak when I feel ready. That's basically my technique. But there's some people who like to do it another way. And some people can't do this. Some people can't, learn on their own. Some people need teachers. Preference. That's basically generally what it is. It's preference. There's lots of ways to do things. There's no one way to do it. That's basically my opinion. Do what you want. Do what feels comfortable. But there's not like you have to do it this way. It depends on the person. Anyway, that's all for this video. See you guys next time.